I never imagined how a simple weekend would shatter the foundation of my perfectly ordinary life. It started with a phone call from my sister, casual and routine. "Hey, can you watch my son for the weekend?" she asked. I said yes without thinking twice. He'd just turned 19. Responsible, kind, easy to be around. I figured it'd be a few days of movies and takeout. Nothing more. But life doesn't follow simple plans. Saturday morning arrived with that crisp autumn air that makes you want to curl up with coffee and a blanket. My nephew left to meet friends, so I embraced the rare solitude. I brewed my coffee, grabbed my laptop, and headed upstairs. My bedroom became a haven, soft light through the blinds, the distant hum of passing cars, the quiet bliss of being alone. I left the door slightly ajar, an old habit from my days living alone. Scrolling through social media, I settled on a feel-good movie to brighten my mood. I didn't hear footsteps, didn't notice the faint creak of the hallway floor. The door opened. I turned my head and froze. He stood there, keys in hand, eyes wide. I forgot my wallet," he muttered, voice strained. His gaze darted away. Mine stayed locked on his face. Heat rushed to my cheeks as the weight of the situation hit me. My heart hammered in my chest. "You should knock," I stammered, clutching the blanket tighter around me. "Yeah, sorry." He backed out, shutting the door behind him. Silence fell like a thick fog. I sat there, pulse racing, disbelief coursing through me. My mind spiraled through scenarios. It was an innocent mistake. Just bad timing. That's all. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. The rest of the day passed in a haze of awkward silence. I busied myself with chores, wiping counters, folding blankets, rearranging pillows. Anything to avoid thinking about the morning. He stayed in his room, footsteps occasionally creaking above me. The tension was palpable, like a thread pulled too tight. I tried to dismiss it. Accidents happen. No big deal. But my mind wouldn't let it go. Every glance at the hallway made my chest tighten. That evening, we sat on opposite ends of the couch watching a comedy. I forced laughter at the punchlines. He didn't. The air felt thick with something unspoken. My stomach churned. I decided to address it. "Look," I said, eyes fixed on the screen. "Let's just forget about this morning, okay?" He shifted beside me. "Yeah, sure." His voice was flat. I turned my head. His jaw was tight, gaze locked on the television. The tension didn't ease. If anything, it grew. The next morning, he offered to help rake leaves in the backyard. I accepted, hoping physical work might break the tension. For a while, it worked. We chatted about mundane things, weather, school, movies. But every time our eyes met, the air shifted. I caught him watching me more than once, quickly looking away when I noticed. My pulse quickened each time. Later, as I stood by the sink washing my hands, I met my own reflection in the window. My heart pounded with an unfamiliar weight. This was no longer just awkwardness. It was something I couldn't name, and didn't want to. I tried to push the feeling aside. It was just a fleeting moment of discomfort, nothing more. Life had a way of magnifying the insignificant when you were lonely. My marriage had been running on fumes for years, and the distance between me and my husband had become a canyon. We spoke mostly in logistical terms: bills, schedules, groceries. The warmth, the connection, long gone. I'd told myself it was normal. Marriage ebbs and flows, right? But that weekend made me question everything. Later that evening, I was scrolling through emails when a message popped up. It was from him. Simple, casual. "Hey, just wanted to say thanks for today." I hesitated, then typed back, "Of course. It was nice." The moment I hit send, my chest tightened. It was just a text. Harmless. But why did it feel like more? The next day, my husband noticed my distraction. "Everything okay?" he asked without looking up from his phone. I forced a smile and nodded. We barely spoke that night. When he left for a work trip, the silence became deafening. The next evening, another message. "Hope you're okay. I've been thinking about today." My thumb hovered over the screen. I typed and erased a dozen responses before finally sending, "I'm fine. Just tired." I told myself it was true. But later, as I lay in bed, my mind raced through the small moments, the glances, the unspoken words, the shift in the air. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding with a mix of fear and something far more unsettling: curiosity. I hated myself for it. Yet, I knew something had already crossed a line I couldn't erase. The following night, I was cleaning the kitchen when my phone buzzed. His name lit up the screen. "Can I stop by? Just need to talk." My pulse quickened. I typed back, "Okay, but just for a bit." Minutes later, headlights swept across the living room walls. I opened the door, and there he stood, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes uncertain. I stepped aside to let him in. The air between us crackled with tension. We sat at the kitchen table, mugs of untouched tea between us. "I don't know how to say this," he began, voice low. I didn't respond, just waited. "I haven't stopped thinking about that morning." My breath caught. "It was a mistake," I said quickly. "An accident." He nodded but didn't break eye contact. "I know, but it changed something." His honesty left me speechless. I should have ended the conversation, but I didn't. The clock ticked loudly in the silence. I rubbed my temples, trying to find the right words. "We can't go there," I whispered. "It's not right." He exhaled sharply and stood. "I get it," he said, walking toward the door. I followed to lock up behind him. He paused at the threshold. And then, without warning, it happened. A moment suspended in time. It wasn't planned, wasn't deliberate, but it happened. When the door closed behind him, I stood motionless, heart racing, mind reeling. Guilt flooded me. I sank into a chair, gripping the edge of the table like it might anchor me. The kitchen clock ticked on, oblivious to the chaos inside me. I wanted to believe it was a lapse in judgment, a fleeting moment born of loneliness. But deep down, I knew it was more, and I couldn't take it back. The days that followed felt like walking through fog. I went through the motions: work, errands, conversations with my husband that were more like exchanges with a coworker. But my mind kept circling back to that night, the moment by the door, the unspoken connection. I told myself it was just loneliness, nothing more. But deep down, I knew better. One evening, my husband returned from work, dropped his keys on the counter, and sighed heavily. "We need to talk," I said, voice steadier than I expected. He rubbed his temples. "Not tonight, Kate. I'm exhausted." My chest tightened. "You're always exhausted," I shot back. He barely looked up. That was the moment I realized I could stay and keep pretending, or I could face the truth. Our marriage was already gone. The next afternoon, my nephew sent a message. "I'm sorry about the other night. I didn't mean to make things complicated." My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I typed, erased, then finally replied, "It's okay. It's not your fault." The message felt hollow. Nothing about this was okay. That weekend, my husband left for another business trip. I sat on the porch watching dry leaves swirl across the pavement. My phone buzzed. His name again. "Can we talk?" I hesitated. Then, "Okay." Minutes later, his car pulled into the driveway. He parked, stepped out, and stood uncertainly by the steps. I stayed seated. He sat beside me. The silence stretched. "I didn't come here to, you know, complicate things," he finally said. "I know," I whispered, "but it's already complicated." His eyes met mine, filled with something unspoken. In that moment, it hit me. This wasn't about temptation or curiosity. It was about the emotional void I'd been living with for years. The breeze shifted. A brittle leaf spiraled through the air and landed between us. I stared at it, heart racing. "I'm leaving him," I said softly. I hadn't planned to say it. The words just appeared. He froze. "What?" "I can't live like this anymore," I said. "But that doesn't mean this, whatever this is, should happen." I stood, walked to the edge of the porch, gripping the railing. His footsteps followed. The tension crackled around us. I turned to face him, my eyes burning. "We made a mistake," I said firmly. And I'm not going to make another one. He looked down, nodding slowly. I get it, he said. His voice was calm, but his shoulders sagged under the weight of disappointment. He left without another word. I stood there, heart heavy, but strangely lighter than I'd felt in months. The next morning, I packed a bag, left a note for my husband, and drove away. As I merged onto the highway, a song played on the radio. Something about starting over. I laughed, though tears blurred my vision. Life had a cruel sense of humor. And just like that, the chapter closed. Not cleanly, not perfectly, but it closed.